NOS4A22 Chapter 6 The First Recruit. Ursula. The first of his recruits was a woman who was made to go against the lions. She is known as Urs. Something that's been bothering Leech is something that shouldn't exist. Surely he thought there was a grand scheme against him, and he was being made out to be the butt of the joke. Aram didn't like being laughed at. What he saw certainly was odd, but not so odd that it shouldn't exist in reality. There are a few logical explanations that would be perfectly realistic and plausible. Aram saw none of these sane ways out of his mania. None of these potential solutions to his festering, lingering problem was ever at any point crossing his sick mind. Aram saw a photo of Urs during the time of Millie and Wayne's childhood adventures. This would be a tragedy in the making, having the Leech obsess over this photo of Urs that in his mind clearly shouldn't exist given the context. There was one more subtle detail that added to the mindfuckery. On the back, it was signed in a familiar cursive that said, "Free," with a water-damaged date of indecipherable numbers that have faded from a time lost. It meant that he was betrayed long ago. He needed to find her, and in his thought process within his densely vast mind, this falsely explained to his own deranged rationalization that she ran away, when in all truth she very well may have actually been taken against her will, kidnapped. Like that would mean something different altogether, obviously, and it would be absolutely disastrous to have this maniac wreaking havoc out of an unjustified bout of revenge. Unfortunately, that was who the Leech was. After all his discipline of being a good and meek man in his life, he had betrayed his own soul and neglected who he was, down to his very spirit. This is the true tragedy concerning Aram and the man he was. He who destroyed his own soul by throwing away who he was, putting his own spirit in the darkness to be tormented by evil forever, by his own disastrously selfish decisions. When Aram the Leech saw that photo, immediately he went from house to house, searching for that face in the night, hoping to see it in sleep or on the streets out and about. Aram crept in windows floating above places where he should not be creeping, using tricks of light to get a good eye's view of innocent faces sleeping cozily in their beds. Sleeping little faces pressed down tightly in their pillows to signify they have let go of all tension, and they are relaxed, sleeping soundly in dreamland, and acutely excited him too much. The Leech was a real ghoul, going into those windows that were left open so that he could get a real good look at those sleeping faces so content without a care in the world in dreamland. For him, they were supposed to be together forever, but she suddenly was gone from him. The darkness Aram was in seemed like it never had left, and felt like it was all he had ever known. True, it was all around him, always, for all of his days. Urs was not his, no matter how much he wished to believe his delusions. Face after face, room after room, and house after house, the Leech was on a hyper-search, fueled by an overwhelming and insatiable lust overtaking his decisions. So what Aram began doing as the Leech in modern times, in his old age, became more evil in his subtlety. He was not doing typical things ever in his legacy of the Leech. After all those years of stalking, his skills were immaculate. The Leech found every potential candidate for his future followers and slaves, which would undoubtedly become his infernal army of leeches, fulfilling his grand scheme. In his sick, twisted mind, this was only a reaction and a counteract from the path he had chosen. If Urs could not be his, then the leech would take all the little girls who passed his test of worthiness to join the Order of the Leech. Aram was at a time very much partners with Urs, who was his first and only love. After many good years passing after being with Urs, she was suddenly gone, and once she was noticed as being truly gone, this brought in a new spirit that entered the now Dark One leech, who once was the good man named Aram. Aram is no more, and is the leftover tragedy of the spirit of jealousy and the spirit of wrath. Vengeful wrath that destroys all, leaving nothing good. Leaving nothing but memories that become one's people prey to forget. As bad as it was, the leech did not like entering young boys' rooms, so he made sure to enter young girls' rooms to seduce them. He never did anything sexual with any of them physically, or any kind of molestation. What he did do is far more subtle and sinister. Aram was no more after all those years, 2,000 years, and only in the times of technological advancements do these things begin to occur. And it was because these things threatened to limit, then eventually take away, all the fun to be had. Mr. Leech had become so bitter by not being wanted, after all those first 400 years of bliss, that he was conflicted as to what to do. He had spent 400 years in a perfect Eden with Urs. Then they took in others after the Order of the Leech began to grow. This saturated their bliss with an abundance of pleasure that overflowed, not quite boiling over, but yet still damaging in lasting ways. Maybe this was not too subtle, nonetheless still subtle enough to go through without being noticed for so long. So the leech had taken over any good that was left in Aram, and the leech declared Aram dead the night he decided to cross the line, when he stumbled across the photo of Urs that should not have existed. What a scene it was in that old photograph that could not be unseen, and never be anything but fresh in his mind. He had this idea to focus all his known knowledge of a twisted, strong creative onto one thing and pass it down forever. The leech in his rage spent all his money on bags and bags of blow pops. He created an altar to enchant and empower his new instruments of evil that would be used to convert his new slaves to his vision. Aram became the leech that day when he constructed and carried out this deranged plan. He removed the blow pop wrappers and replaced them with his own wrappers. These wrappers were instructions for feeling good. He had written this out and had them printed professionally, but privately himself. The idea was to catch the eye of these girls and make them believe they were visited by a very special kind of fairy, like Tinker Bell from Peter Pan, but different, because she could make you feel good, the pleasure fairy. On the top of the sucker's lollipop wrapper, instead of the simply printed blow pop logos and flavor to catch the attention and curiosity of a candy-loving child, there was this big, beautiful eye that was made with eye-popping print that looked so good you would have to see it to believe it. This was magical, and he knew it. He developed his own specially manifested place to make these privately. Once the little girls find the eye looking at them while they stare back at their little hand upon waking, and once they open the wrapper, they will see a beautifully designed tiny letter-style message that has the title, "Just for You." I didn't want you to catch me when you woke up staring back at you, staring you half to death, because humans can't really meet fairies, but I wanted you to know I was looking at you in your sleep because you look happy, but you can be happier and I can teach you. I'm the pleasure fairy, like Tinker Bell, but instead of taking you somewhere, I will make you feel really good. Better than you've ever felt, I promise. It's gonna sound funny, but you have to trust me. This is all you need to do, no matter how funny it sounds, because I know you're going to laugh. All the little girls just like you laugh until they try it. Next time when you go poop, you need to wipe your butt really well, so you can put this sucker in your butt nice and clean. Then when you do that, try putting your finger in your pussy. Do you know what comes next? You will have to find out. Just keep putting this lollipop in and out of your butt, and wiggle your fingers around in your pussy, if you haven't tried already. Your new best friend, the Pleasure Fairy. What he had now become is the opposite of all Aram had worked for. Now Aram was gone, never to return, and so he would kill many who recalled his former self until there were none to do so. That is, unless he wished to speak about the man he was. Fully knowing the line had been crossed, that is what the moniker the Leech had manifested through his most terrible decision. Now that he had become undying in his death, Aram the Leech devised a plan to bring in his legions to serve his ultimate plan of concealed domination. There was yet one other thing printed around the borders of that square wrapper, and he knew that it would be seen while inspected by the ever-curious girls. His goal started out in a very effective manner that developed in his routine for victims. He picked the age of around 11 to 13 depending on his deranged judgment of puberty. He felt they should be getting horny, so the bordering had the information repeated as follows. Want to be a pleasure fairy? Join us. Call 555-555-1134. Aram had learned to put his energy into one big transfer through this meditation he had achieved. There was no hesitation of his desires. Within the Leech, there only was a force driving through an impulse that has ever since an uncompromisable demonic force that never left him, as it was who he became. The things the Leech did in his decrepit years, cheating death, is inexplicable. The little girls were taken and transformed into something else as they were never given a chance. On top of all of this, he recruited what can be described as none other than generals of abduction to groom young children into the order. In the story of Aram, there is a sense of great loss and tragedy with the man who left his life in vain. All his suffering for his nobility was a cause that became, for him, a lost one. All the silence, all the meekness, in vain. The Leech is a ghost of a man who has been living in his head for well over 2,000 years. Living in your head for even 1 year out of your life can do some damage. Once you get to 2 years of the same repetitive in-head, in-thought living, it will do some interesting things to your reactionary way of living. One day you'll be frozen in a moment playing out your daily routine as it gets turned upside down. You'll be hit with a ton of bricks, as they say. Imagine the mind of the Leech. He has been in this mental hell for as long as people have been waiting for their religious savior. 100 years is a long time. 100 years is a span of time that allows an undying mind to experience many seasons of change. Imagine that multiplied. The psychological outcome is catastrophic. All at once, The leech lives in different times within his thoughts, within his head. As he lives and walks in present time, he also walks in the time of his disappearance, as well as down the line every 400 years in between. Each time, every 400 years, he came back to breach the hidden walls of his realm through the order of the leech. So, as the leech walks through his present time, he lives in real time, outside the laws of time, as we choose to recognize. He physically is here and may even interact on a layman's capacity in verbal exchange, but he has his wandering spirit manifested in a spiritual deterioration that has split into different entities, each of the same leech. These are his babies, he calls them, and the leech is very proud of them. His beard curled back like two giant fangs of a mutated tarantula spider, pointing at the easily penetrable part of skin just above the middle of the collarbones under the neck that is all too vulnerable. It seemed like a naturalistic display of ironic art. Oh, the irony. A ram was a taunting individual who was used to being ignored in his work, always hiding in the shadows. Now he could come out into his own distorted light. Now the leech was learning to let go of caring. Caring was all that he was before, a selfless man, taking on all the sufferings around him. This metamorphosis through escaping his own death was an implosion of sorts. Now he spent his time chasing a ghost of his past, as a ghost himself, stuck in this undying state of vampirism, the likes the world would not even wish to come up with in pop horror culture. The leech and his order were the real vampires, not the ones you see portrayed in this child's view of bedtime stories. This is the real horror that not a single good parent will tell their children unless they knew it was real, so that their children do not go to sleep unaware of this very real actual ghoul who works day and night on his mission to expand his order of leeches. The leech is forever chasing his Ursula. She is the wanderer of the stars in the sky over the mountains of the earth. She loves the thought of love, but is content without it even still, and forever, because she knew true love, and it died with Aram when he cheated death out of his apex buildup of selfish reaction. As Aram always remembered his execution, he thought of all the times he helped each and every individual citizen there at his execution. Those who never cared he was being killed unjustly, and looked on with mixed expressions, all of which were not a comforting sign for him. He saw expressions of hate, nothingness, cheerfulness, scoffing mockery, intensely brutal, careless celebration, and partying that was getting rowdy and out of hand. That carelessness of others was what had driven him to madness as he died for what he in his broken mind decided was a lost cause. So, with this constant meditation, Aram the leech became too powerful for his own good. The evil consumed him in an instant, and the fire would never be quenched within his burning hatred for humanity. He was the broken man on the cross who did not coincide with annotations of a savior. His soul was damned to hell in a handbasket charred just enough to be rejected by the devil himself, and so the ghost of a man is forever cursed and doomed to be a wanderer like many wanderers before him, and even more so after. But what sets him apart from the rest is his acute uniqueness that created this incredible all-consuming energy like a fire from within him. The complete changing of a man is prophetic. although terribly perverse and blasphemous. The leech has continually possessed the power of all the wrath and fury of hell. He is the real ghoul of the night. Not only is he corrupting the vulnerable youth who lay sleeping cozily in their beds, he is the feeder of blood, along with his legions of faithful followers. He is the one who taught the secrets of the true magic that cannot be found in any books, because this is the real knowledge of the dark arts that is far too vulnerable and requires great intellect that is not to be shared with the ignorant public domain. There's something that cannot be said enough. Portrayals of ghouls in the night have always been described in such ways to be defeated. Children always have to be told some lie to give this spark of imagination that can do any number of things as their thoughts branch out. I know because I was one of them, but that is another story that won't be told. Just know that what I say is true. All that is said of these ghouls is true. Everything is branched out in these cosmic, vein-like or root-like tentacles of sorts, for lack of a better word. Yet these are not physical matter exactly in our world outside of the dream world Neverlands, of the strong creatives' creations, through magical manifestation, through the self-discovery of the power of the mind. So we have a division of these rejected legions of hell, these ones who came after Aram, the man who the devil can never honor, since he in fact was such a good man before he became what he is now, this leech. Therefore, what we have and what we are left with is this doubly rejected man who had his humanity stripped away from him, the true Nosferatu. The order of the leech should not exist. Urs became her own branch of leeches that operate under her hierarchy-driven agenda. She made herself a general of her own order of leeches. These became strong apart from Aram the leech, and the leech struggled for a time to regain his followers in a great war that was dragged out during most of the Crusades, to give you a good idea of this paralleled historical timeline. The leech and Urs had their followers kill many innocent people who got wrapped up in these power-hungry and selfishly motivated wars. They cannot be described as such, to be fair, because war is cruel in a few specific ways. There were certain elements about this that were just too much to simply be called war. One important fact cannot be missed. One day, it was unforgivable to her when Urs caught their daughter looking closely into a magnifying glass her father Aram gave her himself for a Christmas present in their majestic fortress within the old area of their dwelling together, both the leech with Urs, as a new family, when their daughter was 4 years old. You can only guess what specifically sinister fine print she was caught reading when Urs, her prudent mother, opened her bedroom door to see her daughter in the act, playing out those instructions that were on the wrapper. Poor Urs. This burned her up about as quick as the ants would be burnt up in the center, along with those holes Julie would burn in the leaves with the power of the sun. So this is the birth of her burning core that drives Ursula, the general of just revenge, the leech's overthrow being her ultimate end goal. The thing about the leech was that he kept screwing things up by screwing up things. Things like sacred knowledge revealed that which is forbidden to humanity for the sake of their own souls and their very spirit salvation on through to the other side. Now he didn't have to worry about it, now did he? Heavens no, because Aram wasn't Aram, and he clearly got the free pass directly on through to his version of paradise. His story is the most strange one, and poor Ursula had been taken advantage of, so much so that she as well was destroyed by evil, becoming a new kind of evil, distinct and set aside in adversity with the ones she vowed to destroy in her rivalry. She is currently on a break that is built from a weak truce. A strong truce would not have stipulations include like the ones set in place with this already bad situation. You can't keep feeding the bullshit when there is already too much bullshit. These split legions within the Order of the Leech have become more dangerous than ever because Urs is a wild child, forever on edge and twisted through a brightly burning fire within that is the true fire of rage.